Okay, welcome to the show, Alexandra Solomon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm psyched to talk to you about Marriage 101. Wow. So you teach, tell us a little bit about yourself. I don't want to give it too much away, but you just told me that you teach a Marriage 101 class at Northwestern University in Chicago. And obviously that's very aligned with what we're up to here at the Relationship School and the Smart Couple podcast. And just tell us a little bit about you and this Marriage 101 class, and we'll dive in.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist by training, and I'm a clinical assistant professor through the Department of Psychology at Northwestern. And the place I work, my home institution, is called the Family Institute at Northwestern University. It's the Midwest's oldest and largest center for marriage and family therapy. So in my career there, I'm able to have a few different threads, academic and clinical. So I'm a couples therapist, but I also do a lot of writing and speaking and teaching about romantic relationships. And in addition to training graduate students to be couples therapists, I teach this undergraduate course called Building Loving and Lasting Relationships, Marriage 101, that has become really an institution within the institution of Northwestern University. We just finished up our 17th year teaching the class.
Wow. Oh my God. And how long have you been teaching that class?
So I was in training when the course was first started, but it was started by two of my mentors, Dr. Bill Pinzoff and Dr. Art Nielsen, who were really troubled by the fact that they were seeing couples in their therapy offices, week after week, who were sort of like knee deep, chest deep, face deep in relationship troubles that they've been going round and round about for years. And so the two of them were like, what if we could talk to young adults, people who sort of get to people before they've chosen their partners and kind of give them some skills and some perspectives that would help maybe prevent some relationship distress down the road. So that was the place from which Marriage 101 was born. I was involved from the beginning as a graduate student, a teaching assistant, a lecturer, and then probably 6 years ago, Dr. Nielsen handed over leadership of the course to me. And so it's been my baby now for the last 6 years. And I have really focused the course even less maybe on relationship skills, and it's become a deep dive into self, kind of like what is it that we need to understand about ourselves, how we came to be who we are, and my deep-seated belief, many of our deep-seated belief, that the degree to which we understand ourselves and can work with ourselves in our own internal world and what stirs within us is the degree to which then we can bring to us a partner and create something really dynamic in the space between us. So that's the story of Marriage 101.
Wow, so cool. I'm going to dive into that class here in a minute, but I want to back up and hear a little bit more about you. Why were you interested? What led you to studying psychology and relationships?
Yeah, so when I was a little girl, I was going to become a doctor. I was going to become a pediatrician, and that was my sole purpose. I viewed college as a means to an end to get me into medical school. And then my second year of college, I took a women's studies class and my mind was blown. And I started becoming really interested in systems, sort of like the space between people and relationships and culture and gender and identity and sex and love. And got rather confused about just sort of my direction that I was going to be heading, and then decided that psychology was going to offer me a lifetime of being able to sit with really complicated questions for which there are no straightforward answers. And so that's how I ended up here. And, studying me, I come from a divorced family and had a lot of fear about my own ability to make a relationship work. And so I think oftentimes we study that which we'd like to better master and better understand for ourselves. And so certainly that's been I think it's been a really healing field for me as well, and one that has just, I love it. I love my job. I feel really grateful that I get to do what I do.
Yeah, that's amazing. So along the way, I'm guessing you got some cuts and bruises in relationships, and did you apply that to the class, or are you married? Give us a little sense of your own story there.
I married the boy across the hall.
Okay.
He lived across the hall from me freshman year in our dorm at University of Michigan. And we were friends for a little while, and then we would hook up a little bit, and we go back to being friends. And we were sort of back and forth throughout college. But by the end of college, it was pretty clear to both of us that we wanted to make a go of it. And so this summer, we'll celebrate our 19th wedding anniversary. We've got
Wow.
a couple of kids, 14-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. And yeah, I mean, our marriage been has been a classroom for me, really.
For
I've
sure.
been, he and I have learned along the way, right? When you've been dating the same person since you were basically 19 years old, you grow up together. So we definitely
Hmm.
have had our bumps along the way. And I feel really grateful for what I know and understand about love, even though my husband's favorite joke is that the best pitching coaches and no, the best hitting coaches in baseball are themselves the worst hitters. So he feels like I'm much better at teaching this stuff than I am sometimes when the stuff hits the fan, so
Oh,
to speak.
totally. Yeah, yeah. It's humbling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Okay. Congrats on 19 years coming up. That's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been interesting how each anniversary now feels more like an accomplishment. Like, whoa, that's a long time to be
Yeah.
married. And people have more of a reaction, like a congrats reaction as you get to these later years of a marriage. I know it is impressive. I'm proud of us. Thank
Yeah,
you.
because clearly you guys have weathered some big storms. There's been some challenges along the way, and which
Mhm.
again I'm going to ask you about here shortly. If you would take us to one of those. Well, actually, why don't we do that now, and then we'll come back to the Marriage 101 class and see if there's a bridge. So, take us to some challenge in those 19 years between you and your husband, and what was kind of one of the things that got you through it in terms of a relationship skill or some advice someone else gave you or a tool. What was one of those challenging times, and how did you get through it?
Yeah. I think that, you know, our conflicts have lots of different threads, but I would say the one that has felt the most pressing in recent years is just this dance that I feel like is so common, which is how do we make time and space for your career, my career,
Hmm.
our kids' needs, and taking care of our relationship.
Yeah.
And I have
Oh, yeah.
very few answers to that, but I'm just aware that that I'm my best when I have compassion for me and for us, because there are moments where I get lost from him because my head gets really full of stories about, I'm not doing a good enough job at work. I'm not doing a good enough job at home. You aren't doing a good enough job supporting me in my work.
Hmm.
You are too immersed in your work. And so I'll get these stories going that are either chock full of shame
Uh-huh.
or chock full of blame, right? About one of us is screwing this thing up, and we got to figure out, which one of us it is. And my path back is just kind of like leaning into there's no answer to this.
Yeah.
We're going round and round and round about it, and we both need and deserve a lot of slack cut because we're both really ambitious people and really
Hmm.
driven people, and we're both really devoted parents. Those and we try real hard to make space for all of that. But man, there's plenty of days where I feel like I wake up in the morning, I'm like, okay, so who am I going to disappoint today? Am I going to
Seriously.
fall?
Yeah.
How's this
Let's,
day going to play out?
yeah.
That's my worst. That's my dark space, right? It's like,
Yeah.
how am I going to not measure up today?
Yeah, for sure. And so I'm guessing coming over to the Marriage 101 class, young adults are feeling this way too, with all the pressures and demands that are coming at them. How do you advise and counsel the young folks in your class around this one?
Mhm.
How do I not disappoint myself and my partner, my future partner, my family? How do you guys address that one?
You know, that whole question takes on a really unique twist because of when I teach. So I teach spring quarter to a class of basically 70 graduating seniors. And
Hmm.
so it's a really unique moment. I don't know if you remember that chapter in your, but that moment of like getting ready for this ginormous goodbye,
Yeah.
of saying goodbye to college and getting ready to step into adulthood. And a lot of my students, I don't know if it's self-selection, but I think, the data backs it up, that just, and generally speaking, many young adults are in 6 month or plus romantic relationships. So they're, you know, we have this whole story about hookup culture, and they're all, you know, getting drunk, but many, that is, it's a small but vocal minority of students who are doing that. A lot of the students are partnered, you know, by 21, 22, maybe not to the person they're going to get married to, but partnered with somebody that they really want to try to see if this thing's got legs, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So I spend a lot of time in my office hours just sitting with that, the complexity of like, okay, so you're off to graduate school in New York and she's off to graduate school in California. And are you going to try and make a go of it? And how would you know? On what criteria would you decide that you want to give it a try? And there are so many voices in the ring with them, you know, parents who are saying one thing and friends who are saying one thing. And so I think a lot of the conversations come back to quieting the noise and helping them really value their own deep sense, their own internal compass, and just having comfort that there's that this is some version of what they're going to be doing when they're, you know, my age. Like trying to figure out, how do you make space for love and ambition, for career and nurturing.
Yeah. And how do I take good care of myself and the other person, right? In our relationship with all these demands and needs. And wow, that's great advice. So for you, the listener, I think that's a good one, to just get quiet and try to get below all the noise and all the other people's voices, right? And find your own, see if you can listen to what you're wanting or needing for yourself. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And the bottom line is that the data is really clear that the quality of our romantic relationships counts more in terms of our overall life satisfaction than our career satisfaction, than health, than money. So erring on the side of following love, attending to love, nurturing love, honoring love, you know, that's a pretty safe bet to make, right? That's where a lot of the sweetness in our lives is going to come from. And I think that's a message that young adults, I want our young adults to hear.
Yeah, it's such a great message. Wow. So powerful. And like you said, the data supports, as we connected, I think on Instagram about this, the new 5-year Harvard study, right? About the hookup culture versus actually what teens really and young adults really want is they want guidance around this area, which is why your class is so freaking awesome. What's another element of the class? I'm getting that the big picture theme is self-awareness, because it's so important to know ourselves to the degree to which that's going to help us know other people. What's another couple of elements that you can walk us through in the course that that either light the kids up or that people really kind of wrestle with? And you know, I'm so curious.
Yeah. So the one that students really find revolutionary, their word, not mine, though I don't disagree with it, is just what happens when you start to unpack the classroom of your childhood, you know, and start to really look at, you know, as kids, we're like these little scientists, right? Like we absorb so much in the families we grow up in, so many messages about closeness, about touch, about handling difference, about taking care of yourself versus taking care of somebody else, how to handle difference when it emerges, how to handle our emotions, what emotions are okay, which emotions are not okay. So we've, you know, they by age 20, 21, 22, they're full of lessons about that, but most of them haven't had the time and space to kind of sit down, kind of open up that box and like sift through. What did you learn? Why'd you learn it? How does that work for you? How do you know it doesn't work for you? What do you want instead? And so we work really, really, really hard to be gentle around that, because it can feel really disloyal to start to question how your parents raised you.
Yeah,
But
we don't want to blame the parents kind of game, right?
No, there's no good comes from that. But so we try and take sort of like an ethnography approach, you know, sort of like looking at our family system through the eyes of an anthropologist or an ethnographer, and just being really curious about that culture. And a lot of times I'll have the students work in pairs where they'll talk about their I'll tell you about my family culture, you tell me about your family culture. And oftentimes it's in that sort of mirroring process, or lining up me against you, next to you, side by side, that I can kind of see my system better. So that's another really big thread, is looking at their attachment patterns, their early lessons, what do you want to carry through and what do you want to leave behind with love,
Mm-hmm.
shedding with love.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm guessing that stirs people up. Is that true? Like that stirs people up and then what happens? Like, do you recommend they go to counseling? Do they come to you after class? Like what starts to happen there?
Yeah, the class is definitely, I mean, we have, written into the syllabus is basically like an informed consent. Like this class will stir you emotionally, and there's a ton of support. So I have 10, each year I have 10 graduate teaching assistants who are second year students in the marriage and family therapy program at Northwestern. So it's a team of myself and 10, so there are 11 clinicians guiding these 70
Mm.
students through. And there's a lot of time and focus and attention on their experience. And I say to them, the only way this goes badly is if you sit quiet in your suffering and don't let somebody know that you're having a hard time. We
Yeah.
expect that you're going to have a hard time, but we also expect and are prepared to be with you in it. And sometimes it is. Sometimes we do make therapy referrals, and that's that's sometimes the way that it goes. People feel like, wow, it's I've been hiding from this for a long time, or I think I'm ready to look at this in a more ongoing way. And so sometimes our students will end up starting therapy for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious from a logistical standpoint, you said 70 of our seniors. Does that mean it's one class with 70 people in it?
Yeah. So we meet on Tuesdays for a lecture, kind of a traditional, like
Yeah.
picture a regular old lecture hall and PowerPoint presentation. And
Yeah.
so we got lecture on Tuesday, and then on Thursday we do breakout groups. So pairs of TAs meet with about 14 students, just in different classrooms in the same building. And they've got the curriculum is all written up. So they go in and they lead their group of 14 students through a series of paired discussions or role plays, or sometimes it's a meditation exercise that then they process together. So, so they're doing a kind of a large group experience of lecture, and then this breakout that is academic, but it's really experiential. So the class, I always say the class sits at the intersection of academic learning and experiential learning.
Totally. Cool. That's what we do at the school as well.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds great. I mean, I love that you can hold 70 young people in such a vulnerable conversation. It's just, it feels so powerful to me. Is it one semester or two?
It's one semester. So one 10-week semester. They're
Yeah.
in and they're out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm guessing this is again kind of a turn on for some of those kids who are ripe to help others or understand themselves or psychology. Do some of them, I'm curious if there's a next step for them from this
Right.
class.
It's been cool. There's been a handful of times where we've had somebody who was an undergraduate student in Marriage 101, then they become a graduate student in the Marriage and Family Therapy program, then they become a TA for the course. So it kind of ends up being
Nice.
this full circle experience. Yeah, but you'd be surprised. I mean, we have students, we have math majors and theater majors, and this year we had a really, really big subset of engineers, and that was so cool. Like
Yeah.
it was really neat for
Different
them.
minds.
Yeah, really different minds and different ways of processing. So for some people, it's familiar because it feels similar to their psychology courses. But for some people, they've never done something like this. It's a brand new language.
What is your favorite part of the class to teach?
My favorite part is talking to the students about sex. Really, that's, I think, such an important part
Mm,
of romantic relationships, and a part where I think there's a really, really big gap between what they've learned so far and what I would like them to know and understand about
yeah.
sex. So I always call it like sort of like a wholehearted sex education. And certainly there's a lot we can't cover in just that 1 week that we devote to sex.
Hmm.
But even just conversations about the role of pleasure, communication, and mutuality, those, if they kind of walk away with some new ideas in their minds about each of those three subtopics around sex, I feel like I've done my job there, because I think that's, by and large, given our American sex education curriculum, most of them haven't had a place to talk about the role of pleasure
Yeah.
in sex, or the role of sex in a romantic relationship. Like, why do we have sex? What's the point?
Yeah, totally.
So.
What are some of the most common questions when kids raise their hands about sex? What are you seeing are some of the core fears or complaints or challenges that they're dealing with right now?
Well, I think the biggest, it's, something about the difficulty knowing what they want. So the first thing that we do is I kind of walk them through a meditation where they imagine themselves in a sexual situation that feels really good, however they would define good.
Okay.
And that gives us a place, and that for many of them is the first time they've asked that. So I have a lot of young women who have never had an orgasm, don't know how how pleasure sort of like moves through their own bodies, and they have no idea how they would communicate that to a partner. So that's very often, I think my male students tend to be a little bit quieter around some of that, but what we know from the data is this generation, right, has grown up with pornography being sort of the go-to source of how you learn about sex. And so layering in, helping them understand the difference between porn sex and real world sex is an important conversation. And I think the wheels are turning. I can see it in their writing that there's a sense of relief for the men around shifting from something that's really performance based and very sort of like scripted to something where there's less pressure and more mutuality, and more that the two of them are going to create an experience together. And actually we end up talking a lot about sexual desire. For those who are in a relationship, how do you deal with the fact when one of you wants to and one of you doesn't want to? So we end up talking a lot about that, which is, I find it interesting because it's the same stuff I talk about with my 47-year-old couples.
Yeah. I mean, this is such an essential conversation, right? I mean, so much of what you're teaching these are adult relationships as well. This is what goes on. Yeah. Gosh, so cool. And coming back to your couples that you work with and adults, is there any big difference? Or are we all kind of swimming in the same shit here?
I think we are. I think there are more similarities than differences, for sure. Some of the stuff around gender is interesting because my young adults certainly have some different paradigms around gender. I have students who are LGBTQ and have sort of found ways to live beyond a gender binary, and at the very same time, masculinity and femininity and how much those inform who we think we should be in our romantic relationships is still really central for all my students. So we talk a lot about gender role expectations,
gender norms, like the man is supposed to lead or something.
Yeah. And I feel like that's so much of what I'm working on with my couples. Like I have a lot of couples where she's the breadwinner and he's struggling more around his career, or just has taken on more of a role in the home, and how ginormous of a struggle that is for them, because it's still, even though it's 2017, it's still hard to stand outside of those gender norms in a way that people can feel good about and like they're supported,
Yeah. And men have their own conditioning they have to deal with around feeling emasculated, even though no one's emasculating them. They have their own stuff around their conditioning, how it's like not cool to, or not empowering somehow to be like a stay-at-home dad, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It's so amazing that you cover so much terrain. I'm getting that it's a really deep class and wide in terms of the scope, in terms of what you cover. Just seems that way over here.
Yeah, it's for sure a survey course. Like we land in a lot of places, and there's a lot of, there's depth and there's also breadth. But I sometimes think, okay, so what would like a marriage 202 class look like? Like what would we do next? Like what would we how could we dive even deeper? Because definitely, like I feel like the students leave wanting more, and I leave feeling like I wish we had more time for each of the topics. You can do a whole class on about sex.
Yeah.
A full 10-week course on that.
Yeah, in a way, you're just getting warmed up, right? And they graduate. See you later.
Yeah, good luck with all that.
Yeah.
I always say, keep in touch.
When you work with your adults, because a lot of, when I was working with couples in an office when I was a psychotherapist, so much of the work was about psychoeducation, right? Just like, hold on, you guys, like, you don't even know how to communicate here. Like no, you got to do like an I feel statement, and you got to look at your partner when you're talking to them. And do you find that to be the case, that you're basically taking a bunch of snapshots of your marriage 101 course and educating couples, or is it more experiential for you, or both?
I do. I think there's a lot of back and forth. There are times where I'll talk, obviously in really, really general terms about something that came up in my therapy office this week. I'll sort of weave that into lecture. And then, right, very similarly, I'll weave elements from lecture or from the book. I wrote a book that came out a couple of months ago called Loving Bravely that we now use as the textbook for the Marriage 101 course. And many times my therapy clients will also read that book. So I have felt in my career there's like a ton of flow in that my teaching and my clinical work inform each other big time. Because you're right, like a lot of those little kind of nuggets about I statements or tuning into your own feelings and speaking from, not getting too deeply into your partner's head and all those kinds of nuggets that we use in the therapy office are certainly, there's a lot of flow back and forth between those two spaces. For me.
For sure. Yeah. Cool. Tell us a little bit more about the book. I know you, it sounds like it's published now, or is it kind of on its way?
No, it's out.
Okay.
It's actually getting ready for its second print run. So that's good news.
Yeah. Congrats. That's great.
Yeah.
So tell us about that and where we can find it too, just so while we're here.
So it's called Loving Bravely, 20 Lessons of Self-Discovery to Help You Get the Love You Want. It's published by New Harbinger, and it is, it's a deep dive into yourself, understanding who you are and what you bring into your relationship so that you can bring your best self. And I've had people who are 20 years old and never dated tell me the book is helpful, and I've had 70-year-olds who've been married for 40 years tell me that the book is helpful, because really it's not so much about the other guy, it's about how you're showing up and kind of clearing away stuff that's getting in the way and helping shift to a more heartfelt, compassionate, curious stance.
So important. I mean, the listeners here at The Smart Couple are really into growth and development. So we're all about like looking in the mirror. That's kind of the way here to get a good relationship, is like, you got to look at your own stuff. Right. So I love the alignment there. And I would just want to encourage you, the listener, to check out her book, and we'll leave a link in the show notes where you can get that book. Sounds awesome. I want to get that book. I'm going to get that book.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And where's your website? Where can people find you, Alexandra?
It's www.dralexandrasolomon.com.
Okay, excellent. And we'll also throw that.
Yeah, all the social media is there too, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff.
All right. I'm so curious, as we wind down here, what do your kids think about what you do? Like, are they, I'm curious, because there's some of those kids that grow up with maybe parents like us who sort of are like, Mom, no more I feel statements, I'm out of here. And they sort of turn the other direction. And other kids are really like just very relationally and emotionally mature and kind of on it compared to their peers. So I'm just curious how your kids relate to you and how they view you.
Yeah. Well, my son has, at times of conflict said things to me like, why don't you understand this better? You're a psychologist. Like he can like kind of die. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But, I don't know, that'll be their journey, right? To kind of figure out what it was like to grow up. And I've got books about sex and sex therapy kind of all over the house. I mean, we have pretty open and frank. I know for sure one thing that stands out as I talk to my peers, and that we've talked pretty openly in our house about sex and sexuality and how sex is part of a relationship, maybe in a way that other families don't. And we're forever sort of diagramming relationship problems and communication patterns. And, your friend said this, and then what were you feeling? And what do you think he was feeling? And so far they're pretty darn patient with me. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it's cool. They're really, I'm guessing, my take is they're really fortunate to have you.
Well, I'm fortunate to have them. My gosh, motherhood has been,
oh my God, right?
Yeah, parenthood is, it has grown me, and, I've learned more from them than they will ever learn from me. I'm really clear on that.
Yeah, pretty cool co-teaching arrangement there.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, I really, really value what you're up to and appreciate your time. I'm so grateful you're out there teaching young people. I mean, when I look around, it's like I can't find people like you. So when I hear of someone like you, I'm like, yes, and I want to meet you. So here we are having our first conversation, and I'm psyched. Thanks, Mark Groves, who introduced us, and just thank you, and psyched to have you back sometime.
Yeah, I'm really excited to learn more about what you're doing, because that has always been, that's been a real growing edge for me, is sort of figuring out how do we export this to larger and larger audiences, right? I kind of drives
Yeah.
me crazy. We only have 70 students each year go through it. And so the book was, an effort in that direction, but it's so exciting that you've created such a beautiful platform. So I'm looking forward to getting to know your platform more and figuring out, where our paths can cross again, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, let's jam about that soon.
Mhm. Great.
Okay, thanks.